My name's Mark. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I thought my family was like one of those classic, tight-knit groups you see in cheesy TV shows. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother Ryan, who's 25 now. Growing up, my parents always told us that family was everything, that no matter what, we should stick together. And for a long time, I believed that. I was the responsible one in the family. You know the type, good grades, reliable, the one who never caused trouble. Ryan, on the other hand, was always different. He had this way of making people like him without even trying. Teachers loved him, our neighbors loved him, even random strangers seemed to gravitate toward him. My parents? They practically worshipped him. Ryan could do no wrong, even when he was clearly in the wrong. Meanwhile, I felt like I had to earn every ounce of their approval. But I didn't let it bother me too much. After high school, I moved out for college and eventually got a job in another city. I loved the independence, but I still made time for my family. I'd visit home almost every weekend, even though it was a 2-hour drive. I wanted to stay close, you know? That's what families are supposed to do. Or at least that's what I thought. Recently, though, things have been weird. At first, it was small stuff, things I brushed off as coincidences. Then, it started to feel like something more. For the past few months, every time I've gone home for a visit, I've run into the same problem. The locks on the house are always different. Every single time. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I got to the house late Friday night, just like I always do. But when I tried my key, it didn't work. I thought, okay, maybe I grabbed the wrong one. I tried again. Still didn't work. I ended up standing outside for almost an hour, texting and calling my parents. No response. Finally, my dad opened the door like nothing was wrong. I remember him saying, "Oh, we forgot to tell you we got new locks." Must have slipped my mind. It seemed like an honest mistake, so I let it go. I mean, who hasn't forgotten to tell someone something important once in a while? The second time, though, I started to feel a little off about it. Same story. Showed up, couldn't get in. This time, my mom said, "We didn't think you were coming this weekend, so we didn't bother giving you a new key." That stung a little. I had told them I was coming. I'd even texted the night before to remind them. But I told myself not to overthink it. People make mistakes, right? Then it happened again. And again. Every time there was a new excuse. "Oh, the locks needed maintenance. We thought you were staying in the city this weekend. Ryan said you'd mentioned something about being busy." Each time, the explanation got flimsier. And each time, I felt more like an outsider in my own family. Ryan, of course, found the whole thing hilarious. The last time it happened, I was sitting in the kitchen, trying to get a straight answer from my mom, and Ryan just smirked and said, "Maybe the house is trying to tell you something." My parents laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I didn't. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But then, little details started to add up, like how my old room had suddenly turned into a storage space, even though there were plenty of other places to keep their stuff, or how they stopped calling me as much, except when they needed something, or how Ryan always seemed to know exactly when I'd be visiting, even though I rarely told him directly. It's hard to explain, but I started to feel like I didn't belong there anymore, like I was a guest in my own family, and no matter how much I tried to brush it off, the feeling wouldn't go away. I finally brought it up with my mom one weekend. I asked her why the locks kept changing, why no one bothered to let me know ahead of time. She looked genuinely confused, like the thought of excluding me had never crossed her mind. She said, "We'd never do that to you, Mark. Your family." She sounded so sincere that for a moment I believed her. But the next time I visited, the locks had changed again. Now, I'm starting to wonder if I'm the only one who notices this pattern. Or maybe I'm just the only one who cares. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The whole situation with the locks just didn't add up. At first, I told myself it was all just a series of innocent mistakes, forgetfulness, bad timing, whatever. But the more it happened, the harder it became to ignore. And honestly, the excuses my family gave me started feeling thinner and thinner every time. The first time I got locked out, I stood outside the house for what felt like forever. I was frustrated and confused, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I kept calling and texting, but no one answered. Finally, my dad opened the door, completely unfazed. He casually said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you we got new locks," like it was no big deal. I remember standing there, holding my useless key, wondering how they could just forget to tell me something so important. I tried to brush it off. I mean, people forget things, right? But the second time, it was harder to ignore. I had texted my mom the night before to remind her I was coming. She replied with a thumbs up emoji, so I figured everything was fine. But when I got to the house, the locks had changed again. I stood there, trying my key over and over, hoping maybe I was doing something wrong. I wasn't. When my mom finally opened the door, she looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said, "we didn't think you were coming this weekend, so we didn't bother giving you a new key." I was stunned. I had told her I was coming. She even replied to my text. I didn't want to argue though, so I just nodded and let it go. But deep down, something didn't sit right with me. How could they forget again? After that, it became a pattern. Every time I visited, there was a new excuse. The locks needed maintenance. "We thought you were staying in the city. Ryan said you mentioned you might skip this weekend." Every explanation felt more flimsy than the last. It was like they didn't even care to come up with something believable. And then there was Ryan. He wasn't even trying to hide how amused he was by the whole situation. Every time I brought it up, he'd smirk and make some snarky comment like, "Maybe the house is trying to tell you something." My parents would laugh like it was the funniest joke in the world. But I didn't find it funny. Not even a little. At first, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like they were trying to push me out. And that thought it hurt. A lot. I had always been the one to make an effort, to visit, to stay connected. Why would they treat me like this? I decided to confront my mom about it. One weekend, when Ryan wasn't around, I sat her down and asked her point blank, why do the locks keep changing? Why do I always have to stand outside and wait for someone to let me in? It feels like you don't want me here. Her eyes widened, and she looked genuinely shocked. Mark, we would never exclude you, she said, her voice full of sincerity. Your family. We love you. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the words didn't match the actions. If they loved me so much, why couldn't they bother to give me a spare key? Why did my things keep disappearing from the guest room? Why did Ryan always seem to know more about their plans than I did? The thing that scared me the most was the doubt creeping into my mind. I started questioning everything. Was I being paranoid? Was I overthinking it? Maybe I was just imagining things. After all, my mom seemed so sincere when she said they'd never exclude me. But if that was true, then why did the pattern keep happening? One day, I found myself sitting in my car outside the house, just staring at the front door. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to deal with the awkwardness, the excuses, the feeling that I didn't belong. But I also didn't want to give up on my family. I kept thinking about what my parents always said when I was growing up, family is everything. But how could that be true if they were treating me like I was on the outside looking in? I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that something was wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The more I thought about everything, the less sense it made. So, I decided to pay closer attention. Maybe there was something I was missing, some detail that could explain what was really going on. That's when I noticed something strange, something that made my stomach sink. Every time the locks changed, Ryan was home. It was like clockwork. If he was there, the locks were different. If he wasn't, my key worked just fine. It wasn't much, but it was enough to plant a seed of suspicion. I started wondering, was this just a coincidence, or was Ryan somehow involved in all of this? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I kept my thoughts to myself. But the next time I visited, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I had just arrived and was sitting in the living room when I overheard Ryan talking on the phone in the kitchen. He was laughing about something and his voice carried into the next room. Yeah, Mark's clueless, he said, chuckling. He has no idea. My heart sank. I froze, straining to hear more, but he lowered his voice after that. I didn't know what he was talking about, but the way he said it, like I was the punchline to some private joke, made my blood boil. What was I clueless about? And why was he laughing at me? That moment stuck with me, even though I didn't have any solid proof of anything. I tried to convince myself I was reading too much into it, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan knew more than he was letting on. The next red flag came during one of my weekend visits. When I got to the house, I went up to the guest room to drop off my bag. As I unpacked, I noticed something odd. My spare jacket wasn't in the closet where I'd left it. I looked around the room and realized other things were missing too. My spare toiletries, the book one been keeping on the nightstand, gone. I went downstairs to ask my mom about it. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, do you know what happened to my stuff in the guest room? My jacket and a few other things are missing. She barely looked up from the dishes she was washing. Oh, I cleaned up in there. I must have put them away somewhere. Where? I asked, trying not to sound too accusatory. She shrugged. I'll check later. It's probably in storage. Her answer didn't sit right with me, but before I could press further, my dad chimed in from the living room. Ryan mentioned you probably wouldn't be coming back much anymore, so we figured we'd tidy up the space. I stared at him, stunned. Why would Ryan say that? I never said anything like that. He shrugged, not even looking up from the TV. I don't know. Maybe you mentioned it to him, and we just misunderstood. I hadn't mentioned anything like that, ever. My visits weren't as frequent as they used to be, but I had never said I wouldn't come back. And why was Ryan even talking about my plans in the first place? The whole thing felt wrong, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. It only got worse from there. A few weeks later, I stopped by the house on a weekday evening to grab some tools I'd left in the garage. My dad had asked me to help with a small repair the following weekend, so I figured I'd get a head start. But when I tried to use my key to open the garage, it didn't work. Frustrated, I knocked on the front door. My dad let me in, looking surprised to see me. What are you doing here? He asked. I came to grab my tools, I said, but my key to the garage doesn't work. Oh, he said, scratching the back of his neck. We must have changed that lock too. I'll get you a new key. His tone was casual, but I couldn't help feeling like there was more to it. Why would they change the garage lock without telling me? And why did it feel like every time I visited, another door was closing, literally and figuratively? By this point, I was starting to feel completely unwelcome. I found myself visiting less and less, partly because it was exhausting to deal with the constant changes, but mostly because it hurt. It hurt to feel like an outsider in my own family. It hurt to see Ryan laughing at my expense, to hear my dad talking about me like I was barely part of their lives anymore. And the worst part, every time I stayed away, it seemed to confirm whatever plan they had. The calls from my parents became less frequent. The updates about family events started to dry up. It was like they were slowly erasing me from their lives. I didn't have solid proof of anything yet, but the signs were there. The locks, the missing belongings, the excuses, Ryan's smirks, it all pointed to something deliberate. But why? What had I done to deserve this? And how long had it been going on? I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. Something was going on, and I needed to figure out what. Even if it meant facing the truth I wasn't ready to hear, I couldn't take it anymore. The doubts, the excuses, the way Ryan always seemed to be one step ahead of me, it was eating me alive. I had spent months trying to piece together what was going on, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Something was wrong, and it was time to address it. No more brushing it off. No more pretending everything was fine. It all came to a head during a family dinner. I had been invited back home for the weekend, which felt like a rare occurrence these days. I hadn't seen my parents in weeks, and I figured it was a good chance to clear the air. Maybe, just maybe, I could get some answers. The atmosphere was tense from the moment I walked in. Ryan was already there, lounging in my dad's favorite chair like he owned the place. My parents were bustling around the kitchen, acting like everything was perfectly normal, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I sat down at the table, staring at the food in front of me, my appetite completely gone. Halfway through the meal, I decided to rip the bandage off. So, I began, keeping my voice as calm as I could. Can we talk about the locks? The room went quiet. My mom froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My dad glanced at Ryan, who didn't even try to hide his smirk. What about the locks? My dad asked, his tone casual but guarded. I took a deep breath. Why do they keep changing? And why is it that every time I visit, I have to stand outside waiting for someone to let me in? Why can't I just have a spare key like everyone else? My mom's face turned red. She looked down at her plate, fiddling with her napkin. Oh, Mark, it's not a big deal. We just forget sometimes. You know how busy things get around here, busy? I said, my voice rising. Busy enough to forget your own son can't get into the house? This has happened 5 times now. 5. How is that just forgetfulness? Ryan laughed under his breath and I turned to him, anger boiling in my chest. What's so funny, Ryan? He shrugged, his smirk widening. You're making a big deal out of nothing. So what? It's not your house. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not my house? I repeated, my voice shaking. This is my family's home. I grew up here, same as you. Yeah, but you left, Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. You moved away. You're not here anymore. So why should you get a say in what happens here? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't leave the family, Ryan. I moved out to go to college. I've always made an effort to visit, to stay close. Meanwhile, you're here acting like you're the only one who matters. That's not fair, Mark, my dad snapped, his voice sharp. You don't get to come in here and accuse us of excluding you. We've always welcomed you. Welcomed me? I said, standing up from my chair. How is it welcoming to change the locks every other week? To move my things out of the guest room without telling me? To act like it's a hassle every time I show up? And Ryan, I turned to him, my anger spilling over. You think this is funny? You've been treating me like an outsider for months. What did I do to deserve this? Ryan rolled his eyes. You're being paranoid. Am I? I shot back. Because I've noticed a pattern, Ryan. The locks only ever change when you're here. My things only go missing when you're around. And every time I bring it up, you have some snarky comment, like I'm the idiot for noticing. That's enough, my dad said, slamming his hand on the table. You're being ungrateful, Mark. We've done nothing but support you, and now you're sitting here accusing us of what? Trying to push you out? I'm not accusing, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. I'm stating facts. And the fact is, I don't feel welcome here anymore. I feel like an outsider in my own family. My mom finally spoke, her voice shaky. Mark, we would never exclude you. You're our son. We love you. Then why does it feel like you're choosing him over me? I asked, pointing at Ryan. Why is it that he gets a say in everything, but I'm treated like an afterthought? Because you made your choice. My dad shouted, his face red with anger. You moved away? You started your own life? Ryan's here, helping out, being part of this family. You can't expect everything to stay the same when you're not around. His words cut deep. I looked at each of them, my mom, my dad, Ryan, and realized that no one was going to admit what was really happening. No one was going to take responsibility for how they had been treating me. They didn't even see it as a problem. I pushed my chair back and stood up. You know what? I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm done. I'm done trying to be part of a family that doesn't want me. My mom reached out, her eyes wide with panic. Mark, wait. But I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door, leaving them behind. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning in doubt. I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear, I couldn't keep doing this to myself. I needed to step away, even if it hurt. After that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not for a while anyway. I couldn't keep putting myself in a position where I felt unwelcome, like I was fighting for scraps of attention, or trying to force my way into a place I should have belonged. It was clear that whatever was going on with my family wasn't going to change overnight. So I decided to step back and focus on my own life. At first, it felt strange. For years, I had made visiting home a regular part of my routine. Every weekend, I'd make that 2-hour drive, no matter how tired I was or how much I had going on. It was like clockwork. But now, the weekends felt empty. I didn't know what to do with myself. I found myself staring at my phone, waiting for a call or a text from my parents, some sign that they missed me. But the calls didn't come. I tried to keep myself busy. I threw myself into work, took up a few hobbies I'd been neglecting, and even started reconnecting with some old friends. For the first time in a long time, I was living for myself instead of trying to meet everyone else's expectations. And yet, the silence from my family was hard to ignore. Weeks turned into months, and in that time I started noticing changes. Subtle at first, but they became more obvious as time went on. The calls from my parents grew less frequent, or they used to call to check in every few days. Now it was maybe once a week, if that. And when we did talk, the conversations felt shallow, surface level. They didn't ask about my life, and when I asked about theirs, their answers were vague. Everything's fine, they'd say, or nothing much going on. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being left unsaid. It was like there was a wall between us now, and no matter how much I tried to reach through it, they kept pulling back. The real gut punch came when I found out through social media that Ryan had basically taken over the family home. I was scrolling through my feed one evening when I saw a photo someone had tagged him in. It was a party at my parents' house, our house, but it didn't look like the house I remembered. The walls were painted a different color, the furniture was new, and the decorations were completely changed. It didn't even look like my parents' style. It looked like Ryan's. He was in the photo, of course, standing front and center with a drink in his hand, surrounded by friends. There were people I recognized, people I didn't. But what stood out to me the most was the caption, "Another great night at Ryan's place." Ryan's place. I stared at those words, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. Since when was it Ryan's place? It was our family's home. The home we grew up in. The home I had always been told was just as much mine as it was his. But now it seemed like he had taken over completely, and I wasn't even in the picture anymore. A few days later, a mutual friend reached out to me. We were catching up over coffee when she brought up the party. "It's wild how Ryan's basically running the show over there now," she said with a laugh. "He acts like he's the head of the family or something." Her words stung, but I forced a smile. "Yeah, I've noticed," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She looked at me, her expression shifting to one of concern. "You okay, Mark? I mean, it must be hard, being out of the loop like this." I wanted to tell her everything, to unload all the frustration and hurt I'd been carrying, but I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded and said, "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Not really. Hearing someone else confirm what I had already suspected made it feel more real. Ryan had positioned himself as the center of the family, and in doing so, he had pushed me out. Whether he had done it intentionally or not didn't matter. The result was the same. Still, I refused to let it break me. If they didn't want me to be part of their lives, fine, I wasn't going to beg for a seat at the table anymore. Instead, I decided to step back completely, not just physically, but emotionally too. I stopped reaching out, stopped asking questions, stopped waiting for invitations that would never come. I started observing from a distance, piecing together bits of information where I could. Social media became my window into their world, one that I was no longer a part of. Every post, every photo, every caption told a story of a family that had moved on without me. It hurt, but it also gave me clarity. For so long, I had been chasing this idea of family, trying to hold on to something that wasn't what I thought it was. Now, I was starting to see the truth. Maybe I'd never get the full story. Maybe I'd never know why things had turned out this way. But one thing was certain, I couldn't keep looking back. It was time to move forward. The hardest part wasn't letting go of the house or the traditions, or even the time I had spent trying to stay connected. The hardest part was accepting that the people I had once trusted to always have my back had chosen someone else. That they had made their decision, and it wasn't me. But even in the midst of all that pain, I found a small sense of peace. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't chasing after something I couldn't have. For the first time in a long time, I was putting myself first. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something new. Months had passed since I stopped visiting my family, and in that time, I had learned to live with the silence. It wasn't easy, but I had started focusing on myself, my career, my friends, my hobbies. Life didn't feel as heavy as it used to, but there was still a lingering ache, questions I couldn't answer, things I couldn't let go of, no matter how hard I tried. Then, one day, out of the blue, my cousin Katie called me. Katie and I had always been close growing up. She was like the big sister I never had, fiercely protective, always looking out for me. But as we got older, we drifted apart, mostly because of distance. So when her name popped up on my phone, I was surprised. "Hey Katie," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "It's been a while." "Hey Mark," she replied, her voice hesitant. "Yeah, it has. Listen, I wasn't sure if I should call, but I've been thinking about you. Are you okay?" The question caught me off guard. Yeah, I'm okay." "Why?" She sighed. "It's just I've been hearing some things. And honestly, I don't know if they're true, but I felt like you deserved to know." My heart started to race. "What kind of things?" She paused, and I could tell she was trying to choose her words carefully. "I was at a family gathering a few weeks ago. You know how Ryan loves to hold court at those things, right?" I didn't respond. I just waited for her to continue. "Well," she said, "he was talking about you. He told everyone that you'd had some big fight with your parents over money and that you decided to cut ties with the family because you didn't get what you wanted." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A fight over money?" I repeated. "Katie, that never happened. I've never asked my parents for money. Why would he say that?" "I don't know," she said softly. But that's not all. I overheard him talking to one of his friends later, and he was laughing about how he's finally convinced your parents to tighten the family circle. He said you were too selfish and never around anyway. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. My chest tightened, and I struggled to find the words. He said that? To everyone?" Katie's voice was full of sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I didn't know what to say at the time. I didn't want to cause a scene, but it didn't sit right with me. That's why I called. I thought you should know." I sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear. Ryan had not only pushed me out of the family, he had rewritten the narrative. He had painted me as the bad guy, the selfish one, the one who didn't care. And worse, he had convinced my parents to believe it. "Katie," I said finally, my voice shaking, "thank you for telling me. I don't even know how to process this right now, but I'm glad you called." "Of course," she said. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, replaying her words over in my head. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. But most of all, I felt determined. If Ryan thought he could get away with this, he was wrong. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give them a chance to prepare. When I arrived, I stood outside for a moment, staring at the door. It felt strange, being back after all this time. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but I knew I couldn't. I knocked, and after a moment my mom opened the door. Her face lit up in surprise. "Mark, what are you doing here? We need to talk," I said, stepping inside. My dad was in the living room, watching TV. He looked up, startled, as I walked in. "Mark," he said, sitting up. "This is a surprise." I didn't waste any time. "Katie called me," I said, my voice steady. "She told me what Ryan's been saying about me, that I had a fight with you over money and decided to cut ties, that I'm selfish and don't care about the family." My mom's face went pale. My dad looked away, suddenly very interested in the floor. "Is it true?" I asked, looking between them. "Did Ryan tell you that? Did you believe him?" My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Mark, it's not what you think, it's exactly what I think," I said, cutting her off. "Ryan's been lying about me for months, and you went along with it." "Why?" She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't know what to believe," she said. "Ryan kept saying you didn't care, that you were too busy for us. He made it sound so convincing. And you just believed him?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You didn't even ask me?" My dad cleared his throat, his face red. "We didn't want to cause any trouble. Ryan, he has a way of making things sound reasonable. We thought it was easier to just go along with it." "Easier for who?" I demanded. "Because it sure wasn't easier for me. Do you have any idea how it feels to be shut out of your own family? To be treated like I don't belong?" My mom looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Mark, I'm so sorry, I never meant to hurt you." Her apology felt hollow, but I knew she meant it. Still, the damage was done. Ryan had manipulated them, and they had let him. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. After my parents' tearful apologies, I drove home feeling empty. The confrontation had given me some answers, but it didn't make the pain go away. Knowing that Ryan had manipulated them, twisted the truth, and pushed me out of the family didn't magically fix things. If anything, it made everything worse. The trust I'd always had in my parents was broken. They had chosen to believe Ryan's lies without ever questioning him or reaching out to me for the truth. I kept asking myself, how do I move forward from this? How do I rebuild something so fractured? For the next few days, I stayed quiet. I didn't reach out to my parents, and they didn't call me either. I could tell they were waiting for me to make the next move. But I needed time to figure out what I wanted, and what I was willing to tolerate moving forward. The truth was, I couldn't just forgive and forget. Ryan had gone too far, and the fact that my parents had blindly gone along with it left a deep scar. At the same time, I didn't want to lose them completely. As much as they had hurt me, they were still my mom and dad. Cutting them out entirely didn't feel right, but I knew I couldn't let things go back to the way they were. I decided to set boundaries. A few days later, I invited my parents to meet me for lunch. It felt safer to talk in a neutral space, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of the past. When they arrived, they looked nervous, like they weren't sure what to expect. I didn't waste time beating around the bush. "I've been thinking about everything," I said, my voice steady but firm. "And I need you to understand that things can't just go back to the way they were. What Ryan did, what you let him do, hurt me more than I can put into words." My mom's eyes filled with tears, and my dad looked down at his hands, but I kept going. "I'm willing to work on rebuilding our relationship, but there are going to be boundaries. I won't tolerate any more favoritism or excuses for Ryan's behavior. If he's at a family event, I won't be there. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I feel disrespected or unwelcome." My mom nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "Mark, we understand. We want to make things right. We'll do whatever it takes." My dad was quieter, but he nodded too. "We should have stood up for you," he admitted. "We let things get out of hand, and that's on us." Their responses gave me a small sense of relief, but I was still wary. Words were one thing, actions were another. I wasn't going to let my guard down so easily. As for Ryan, I knew I couldn't keep him in my life. Whatever his reasons were for doing what he did, jealousy, insecurity, or just plain spite, it didn't matter anymore. He had shown me who he was, and I believed him. I didn't make a big announcement or have some dramatic confrontation. I just stopped engaging. No calls, no texts, no interactions at family gatherings. He became a non-factor in my life. At first, my parents struggled with this new dynamic. They didn't like the idea of me and Ryan being completely cut off from each other. My mom tried to convince me to work things out with him, but I stood my ground. "Mom," I told her, "I'm not asking you to choose between us. You can have a relationship with him if you want, but I'm done. I need to protect my peace." Eventually, they stopped pushing. I think they realized that if they kept pushing, they might lose me altogether. With Ryan out of the picture, I started to feel a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't constantly on edge, wondering what he was saying behind my back or how he was manipulating the situation. I could focus on myself, on building a life that wasn't weighed down by his toxicity. Slowly, I started to reclaim my sense of peace. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had neglected, and even started therapy to work through everything I had been holding on to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. My relationship with my parents wasn't perfect, but it was improving. They made an effort to call me more often, to include me in family updates, and to show that they were committed to rebuilding my trust. It wasn't always easy, there were still moments of tension and lingering resentment, but we were making progress. One night, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on everything, I realized something important. Family isn't always what you hope it will be. Sometimes the people you think you can count on let you down. Sometimes they hurt you in ways you never expected. But that doesn't mean you have to let it define you. I had spent so much of my life chasing the idea of family, trying to fit into a mold that no longer existed. Letting go of that was painful, but it was also liberating. I didn't have to keep chasing. I didn't have to keep proving my worth to people who didn't see it. I could set boundaries, choose peace, and focus on the relationships that truly mattered, the ones that brought me joy and respect. In the end, I learned that self-respect is more important than blind loyalty. It's not easy to walk away from people you love, but sometimes it's necessary. And when you do, you might just find a stronger version of yourself waiting on the other side.